Well, this is some interesting news. The Big 12, it looks like, is going to be expanding next year, 2023. So not this football season coming up here in a couple of months, but by the time the following football season rolls around, the 2023 football season, it's expected that the Big 12 will have expanded, adding Central Florida, Cincinnati, Houston, and BYU. Now, we knew those four teams had been accepted into the Big 12, but we didn't know when they were going to join because Texas and Oklahoma, of course, are still in the Big 12, but are leaving for the SEC sometime between now and 2025. So it's possible the Big 12 could have 14 teams, not this season, but for the next couple of seasons until 2025 when Texas and Oklahoma leave, which would put the Big 12 then down to 12 teams. They have 10 now. They're losing 2, adding 4. Now, Houston, Central Florida, and Cincinnati are in other conferences. So the details on that still have to be worked out as far as buyouts go to their respective conferences in order to leave to join the Big 12 by next season. BYU's not in a conference, so there's nothing they really have to worry about. They're basically just waiting on the Big 12's permission to come in, which looks like is going to happen next season. It was reported, I think yesterday, maybe the day before, that the Big 12 is having a big meeting next week with all the school presidents and athletic directors or whatever, and they're going to sit down and finalize all this stuff with those 4 schools. It remains to be seen what that's going to mean for Texas and Oklahoma. Now, they're under contract with the Big 12 through 2025, and the only way to get out of that prior to 2025, of course, is to pay those huge sums of money that were reported last year. I think was in the $50 million range or something like that. Now, for Cincinnati, Central Florida, and Houston, they too will have to pay buyouts, but the buyouts are much smaller because the TV contracts and everything that go along with those group of 5 conferences clearly are much smaller than what they are for Texas and Oklahoma to get out of the Big 12. So we'll find out some more definite and concrete information next week after the Big 12 holds these meetings, and they're expected to make some final decisions in terms of when those teams are coming in, and it's being widely reported that it's going to be for the next calendar year, which will be 2023. So if that's the case, and Texas and Oklahoma choose to stay in the Big 12 rather than paying those buyouts, we're going to have 14 teams in the Big 12 next season. The current 10 plus Cincinnati, Central Florida, BYU, and Houston. When will Texas and Oklahoma actually join the SEC? Could it be 2023? It could be. This is really the most news or the most new information anyway that has come out regarding the Big 12 and them losing Texas and Oklahoma and expanding since around this time last year, or maybe it was a little later in the year. What was it, June? May or June, I guess it was last year when all this stuff broke with Texas and Oklahoma. So not a whole lot has come out since then in terms of when Texas and Oklahoma might actually make the change to the SEC. Most people that I know, which includes fans of all the teams in the SEC and Texas and Oklahoma fans, I'm including them in this too, most of the fans I talk to that are fans of either an SEC team or Texas and Oklahoma, they want it to happen sooner rather than later. It feels kind of weird to announce this big of a shift, right? It's a big deal. Texas and Oklahoma, regardless of what you think of them and their football teams this year, last year, whatever. Those are 2 huge programs in college football, 2 national brands, worldwide brands, really, when it comes to college football. And it's a huge deal, and it's a little weird to announce something that big and then make people wait 2, 3, 4 years for it to happen, which is, of course, what's going on with the playoff expansion, too. But so I don't know. It's a lot of money. We kind of have this idea in our head that these schools just print money, and look, they make a killing. They make a ton of money, no doubt about it. They also spend a lot of money. I don't know if Texas and Oklahoma are willing. Forget about whether or not they have an extra $50 million just sitting around. Let's say they do. I don't know if they're actually willing to pay all that money to come to the SEC early. I just don't know that. The other thing is you've got the TV contracts that are going to get renegotiated in 2025. So in that respect, it makes a little sense maybe for Texas and Oklahoma just to wait till 2025, right? They can come into the SEC. They then can sit down as members of the SEC and negotiate the new TV contracts for the next 10, 15, 20 years, whatever contract they end up signing. And that also just happens to be the same time that the current college football playoff contract expires. So there's a lot of things, there's a lot of norms in college football that are ending or changing in 2025. The playoff structure and TV contracts for the SEC in particular. So I don't know. I mean, I would love it for, I would love to find out next week that Texas and Oklahoma are coming to the SEC next season. The sooner the better, is the way I see it. But I'm just curious what y'all think. And what do y'all think about those 4 teams that the Big 12 added? I've heard people say, are they still going to be considered a Power 5 conference? I think they will. I think they will. I mean, let's be honest. Houston and Cincinnati right now, today, are better than half the teams in the Big 12. And that's not necessarily a knock on the Big 12. Houston might be the best Group of 5 team in America this year. Cincinnati's been the best Group of 5 team in America the last 2 years. Prior to that, the best Group of 5 team in America was Central Florida. And while BYU has struggled against major Power 5 opponents, they have won a lot of games over the last few years, playing sort of a patchwork schedule of whatever teams they can piece together. Of course, they're an independent, so they don't have any games that are automatically scheduled for them every year like the conferences do. So they're adding, 4 pretty good teams. They're still going to have Baylor, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, TCU, all the teams still in the Big 12. I think it's probably still a Power 5 team. They're maybe lacking that one dominant program that seems to emerge in any one conference at any one given time, whether, Florida State running through the ACC for a while back, 8 to 10 years ago, Clemson now, Alabama in the SEC, Ohio State in the Big 10. Maybe they lack like that one big dominant program, but maybe one will emerge. I mean, you look at teams like Cincinnati, Central Florida, and Houston especially. They're going to get a huge uptick in recruiting just by being able to tell recruits we're a Power 5 program, right? Let's face it, there are some recruits, if they're good enough in high school and are getting offers from multiple Power 5 programs, they're not even going to consider a Group of 5, right? Well, for Houston, Cincinnati, and Central Florida, that's about to change. They can tell, they will be Power 5. And those have been pretty, 3 pretty good schools. You have to assume they're all 3 going to get a little bit better by joining the Power 5. There may be an adjustment period. They may have a down tick in terms of total wins the first couple of years they're in the conference maybe. But I think over the long run, those will be 3 pretty good schools in the Big 12. BYU, I'm not sure how much of a recruiting bump they'll get because I'm not going to get into it. They have some recruiting qualifications with the magic show and stuff they have going on out there that maybe some other schools don't have. But anyway, some pretty big news. Big meeting next week. All the powers to be within the Big 12 getting together and deciding when Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and BYU will be officially joining the Big 12, and it's expected to be next season. Anyway, let me know what you think down below. Have a good morning.